privacy and code of conduct, a slide about the goals of the IETF, and the charter of the Gaia group, the objectives from the webpage. I haven't changed them since the beginning, so it might look maybe a bit needing for an update. And then there is the agenda as we had it like yesterday. And then, well, the presentations. And yeah, there is a reminder in the chat from Colin that please, masks are required in the meeting room.
And Landro, should we just get started, given we've got some of our presenters with us?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, we all remember the content. So, so the first thing is the Node Well document that is common to all IETF and IETF meetings. And I'm going to read in detail. You will find it in the data tracker. That is not different from other meetings. And then there is a privacy and code of conduct that you have to follow. Basically, work respectfully with others, and the code of conduct and the anti-harassment procedures. You know, the IETF is slightly different from the IETF because we focus on long-term research issues, whereas IETF is more focused on short-term, and that we conduct research, and we are not an standards development organization. We can also publish RFC documents, but there's some additional information in case you're interested. And particularly, specifically about the Gaia group. So you see the charter mentions a study from Internet Society from 10 years ago, but the situation hasn't changed quantitatively or qualitatively enough to make this charter out of date. It's still about half the population is not able to access the internet as they should, as they would need. And then the objectives is about the visibility of the issues, about creating a shared vision, articulating collaboration, document experiences and research results as we have today in the program, and document costs and develop a perspective about how we can influence the IETF work and others to address the problem. And this is the agenda. So this is what we are doing now. The first bullet point. And by the way, one of the points is the minutes taker. Is there anyone willing to do that? Given that, in addition, the tool allows multiple writers. So is there anyone without exclusive access to take some notes? It will help us to produce the minutes later. So if you want to, there's a website, which is this, Notes IETF. You can access with your IETF login. And then this is the starting point from the minutes. So if anyone is interested, locally or remotely, I copied in the chat the URL, although it doesn't. Oh yeah, it's already there. Okay, so that's all from my side. So perhaps we can move to the first presentation, unless there is any other comment from the co-chairs. Do you want to?
Just one comment.
Yes.
Yeah, one comment, Leandro. Sorry. Hello, everyone. I think maybe we could have Curtis introduce himself.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Sure, great. Hello, everyone. Some of you have met me before. I've been to a few IETFs at this point. My name is Curtis Hammerl. I'm an assistant professor, soon to be associate professor at the University of Washington, where I've been working on internet access, global internet access for a really long time, deploying networks in many remote rural parts of the world, including in partnership with some folks who are talking, particularly Flip at the University of the Philippines. I guess no longer at the University of the Philippines. I guess you're at DOST. And even here, we just deployed a network up in the Canadian Arctic and run the Seattle Community Network with a bunch of folks. And so I'm joining up as a Gaia chair after participating in many, many Gaias at this point. I think my first one was at the NSDR in like 2010 when Arjuna was one of the chairs. So I'm really excited to be here and to contribute back to this community.
Mm-hmm. I see Colin is in the queue, as well as Ben. I suppose Ben is.
Yeah. I just wanted to very briefly thank Curtis for being willing to step up to this role. I think it's really good that he's doing that, and I'd like to welcome him and hope for many more productive years in the Gaia group.
Thank you so much, Colin. And in order to keep the number of co-chairs an even number, then my plan is to step down after this meeting. Well, thank you very much for everyone that made these meetings possible and the great contributions. I will keep participating in Gaia, so it's simply I'm changing position in the room. So I'm looking forward to meeting you face to face, hopefully soon. So the first
again, thank you, Leandro, for very many years of service to the group. I very much do appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. I learned so much, and it's like great. And I hope Curtis will enjoy as well as I did. Okay, so then, Peng, I'm going to give you screen access, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen that I think is required.
Thank you. All right, I'm just changing my screen. So now
we can see your screen. Yes.
Okay. So change to my view to the full size.
And what do you say, Leandro? Should we give Peng a 2-minute warning close to the time, or should we set the timer? Every speaker has about 20 minutes, then we have Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I hope you can see my screen well. If you have some issues of not seeing the screen, please let me know. So it's my pleasure to talk about today's topic of my presentation about satellite integrated community networks, and I will talk about the management gap that are existing in this paradigm. I will talk about with autonomous maintainability. So just a brief introduction to myself. I'm a adjunct professor at the Sheridan School of Computer Science, as well as the Department of Stats and Neuro Science at the University of Waterloo, Canada. I'm also a research officer in Digital Technologies Research Center at National Research Council, Canada. So here's the outline of my presentation. First of all, I'm going to talk about the broadband gap that can be bridged with the advanced satellite networks. And then I would talk about the satellite integrated community networks, and followed by the management gap identified, and also the autonomous maintainability as an important step to realizing the management challenge existing in the SICNs. And I will give a proof of concept in terms of a case study, and will make a conclusion at the end. So just to give us a quick updated view of the current 2 large low Earth orbit satellites in short animations, what you can see that is they are actually, sorry, I think there's some issues right here. Oops. Maybe I have to bear with me for a second. I have to bring it back somehow. Sorry about interruption. I think there's an issue about video playing of the system. Anyway, so we can see that there are 2 low Earth orbit satellite constellations that are up and running in our outer space of Earth. And what you just saw is the animation, which runs faster, 28 times faster than its normal speed. And what we can see here is that the LEO satellites in these constellations are moving, and they can have global coverage. So in this slide, we can see some examples of the advanced satellite platforms. And the recent revamped interest for satellite communications actually results from the reduced cost for space launches and enhanced capability of hardware platforms that makes the broadband satellite internet possible. And for those examples, we can see they are actually nano and small satellites, as small as a shoebox size, or either very lightweight, as we see from the example from SpaceX Starlink constellation, as well as the Telesat satellite constellations. Both are very representative satellite constellations. And they will form a network in large or mega constellations in space when they're fully launched. And the medium Earth orbit satellites and the GEO satellites are also getting enhanced recently. So there are 2 examples shown here. One is the SES high throughput satellite with 30,000 steerable beams supporting 50 megabytes per second to 10 gigabits per second data rate. And the other one is the Inmarsat very high throughput GEO satellite. So with those advanced systems, of course, there are other enabling technologies on the user terminal side as well. With all those innovations and improvements that are made to the satellite communication systems, we can actually now provide very high quality internet connection to the rural and remote communities. And we can see that satellite networks has long been a key connectivity option for community networks on a global scale. And in the report of broadband coverage in Europe 2017, satellite broadband is considered the most pervasive technology in Europe in terms of the overall coverage. And we can see other similar coverage and cases around other places of the world. And the development of the satellite networking technology also matched the recent developments over the different technical communities. For example, 3GPP has been looking at the integration of LEO satellites or non-terrestrial networks into the 5G and beyond infrastructure. And the Internet Society in this year's annual plan, they have also mentioned the exploration of looking at LEO satellites for community networks or satellite networks. So with the international efforts on closing the broadband gap for digital divide, including the implementation of new satellite networks and the telecommunications infrastructures in rural and remote areas, a traditional satellite-dependent community networks, or SDCNs, are envisioned to be transforming into a satellite-integrated CN, SICN, featuring a integration of heterogeneous networks and segments to provide broadband, resilient, and agile end-to-end connections. As a example, simple example shown here, we can see this SICN architecture in different parts. For example, edge, backhaul, and the backbone segments between CN users and service providers. And the CNs are connected to the edge or access network with at least a satellite front end and backhaul links provided by the satellite itself. And also it has optional terrestrial network connections, which were all connected to the backbone of the internet, including the service providers. So the edge and the backhaul portions represent the most possible places where actually. Types, for example, fixed networks like copper or cable and fiber optical options, and wireless networks, including cellular and microwave options, so on and so forth. This is the geographical view of SDCNs, where the blue dots denote the communities with satellite connectivity in Canada and the US, based on the 2020 National Broadband Data Canada and the ACS Internet Connectivity Data in the US. This view shows the SDCNs are scattered over the continent, which also gives us a view or indication where the satellite independent community networks can be based on. So talking about the SICN paradigm, we will realize there are many technical challenges. And how to ensure, for example, how to ensure the performance metrics and different service level agreements in terms of latency, data rates, reliability, as well as the fairness is very important. And it can also introduce the complexity in communication and computation. For example, with the introduction of space assets with high dynamics in terms of velocity, access states in the routes, and the signal propagation impairments caused by atmospheric conditions and system heterogeneity in payloads, how to ensure a reliable and resilient communication is important. And the new computing scenarios will emerge as well, because we have different nodes in space, air, and ground components, and how to use those nodes to facilitate some new computation paradigms or scenarios. For example, nowadays the satellites are using software-defined radios, and also they're going to employ the software-defined networking technologies, and that will really gives us really interesting discussions about the new architectures in computing. And also with the increasing adoption of AI algorithms in networking, the data will be a challenging part to resolve for SICNs. Due to the fact that some parts of the management data, for example, in satellite networks parts, may be scarce. And of course, there are security challenges as well, where vulnerabilities can occur in different network infrastructural segments and protocols, and algorithms running on top of that will be a challenge in design. And we also have the network management considered as a big challenge as well, especially when the network gets more complex, where maintenance, resource management, and orchestration for different parts of the integrated network need to be done efficiently. And also, the governance model will get changed, or we need to put more thoughts into the model based on the multi-stakeholder model that internet has been based on. And because we have multiple stakeholders in the model, such as network operators, community users, stakeholders, and service providers, etc. And now I'm going to focus on the talking about the management gap that are existing for SICNs, as we are trying to bridging the broadband gap, which is now possible nowadays with the technologies and connectivity options right now, where there is a hidden or management gap in community networks that needs to be addressed, especially for SICNs, where the autonomous maintainability is an essential step to achieving this goal. Due to the fact that the community users often suffer from the poor maintenance efforts or responsive maintenance efforts, and also there's a lack of technical support always in there. So the autonomous maintainability or self-maintainability can be viewed as a capability to monitor and diagnose itself and maintain its functions in case of failures or performance degradation. And we have seen that there are relevant discussions from different organizations, such as the standards, different development organizations from ITUT, ETSI, and also ourselves, IETF. So the concept now, talking about self-maintenance, I would like to propose a hierarchical approach to that. So here, the concept of this approach is shown in this diagram. There are basically two parts of the diagram. One is the, on top is the machine learning pipeline, and the other part is the hierarchical view of how those results get introduced to help with the anomaly identification step. And then once we identify the anomalies correctly and efficiently, we can execute some anomaly mitigation schemes specific to the SICNs. So overall, the machine learning based multi-class classification problem will be formulated as a unified way of handling network intrusions, faults, detections, localizations, as well as service system reliability analysis for the anomaly identification phase. And the features extracted from the network flows can be used to predict the network states where the multiple network anomalies caused by different factors can be considered. And the class labels represent the states in the data sets. So the states of the network can be normal or abnormal states, or it can be extended into multiple fine-grained states. Depends on the applications. So illustratively, the self-maintenance process I'm talking about can be split into three phases: identification, planning, and execution. And we can see in the presence of a good mitigation scheme that can be provided by a backup connection during the time period for repairs, the time taken for anomaly identification, denoted by T right here, is important. The less time, the better. Now comes to the kind of a proof of concept setup, because we wanted to know if or how the machine learning algorithm can help with a self-maintenance scenario following the hierarchical approach design. In this case, we set up a SICN in a emulated environment where satellite entities and routers are based on the mininet virtual machines and satellite and the fixed connection backhauls labeled as N0 and N1 are connected to an SICN, including 3 communities on the very left, represented by local networks N5 to N7, and the backbone service provider networks N2 to N4 are shown on the right. And N5 represent an SICN setup with cellular distribution, and N6 represents the classic, the traditional SDCN setup, and N7 represents another SICN setup with the connection diversity provided by satellite and fixed connections. And each router here were added to each network as an autonomous system to generate and log BGP traffic. Because it's very representative traffic, we wanted to know, to see the potentials of whether we can use that for these self-maintenance case study. And the traffic flows from the service provider to community network end users are through N1 to N0. Just to show the brief experimental results, the table on the left shows the indicates that there are promising machine learning algorithms available. So there generally are recurrent neural network methods and example methods. Specifically, there are GRU and LSTM for RNN models, and XGBoost and RF random forest for the example method in machine learning. And also we can see that with the hierarchical approach, where we experimented with the public network intrusion data as well as our own generated data through that network emulation for BGP traffic, we can see that there are performance improvements by using the hierarchical approach, as shown in the pipeline in the previous slide. So all those top performing machine learning methods, they can all have the improvements in terms of accuracy, in terms of the key performance metrics, such as accuracy, F1 score, and the training time. So here I also added the BLS, broad learning system, as a comparison, because this is also one of the promising top performing methods. For conclusion, we can see that community networks are expected to have increasing integration with the space and terrestrial components brought by the advanced satellite networks and communication in the form of satellite integrated community networks, SICNs. And SICN as a paradigm can provide a promising configuration for leveraging not only space component, but also ground and air setups. And the proposed machine learning-based hierarchical approach to autonomous maintenance for SICN management shows some promising results, although there are going to be some room for future contributions for sure. And for this presentation, the major reference is from the reference 1, although all major other references are listed right here. Thank you very much.
Oops,
Thank you.
sorry, you're right on time. Yeah, go for it, Leandro.
Sure, Jane, please.
Are there any questions for Peng? That was fabulous. I see Rajiv and Philippe are they're in the queue, but I think you're speaking after Peng. So does anyone have a question for Peng? Philippe, you do?
Are you at all concerned about the space problem?
If I can jump in for Peng.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Peng. This is basically going back, I think, to slide 7 or 8 of your presentation, where you showed us a broadband map, coverage map. Sorry, it's slide 8, correct, not 7. Where you talked of the coverage across North America, and you showed, the general distribution of satellite terminals and SDCNs. So I found one thing very surprising. Canada, being a extremely sparsely populated uh, region, I would expect to have had a lot more SDCNs being deployed over there because of the vast distances involved. And even in the United States, the Midwest and the mountain regions seem to have like big gaps in them, uh, where you'd expect a lot of rural communities to be there, and they are kind of ideal locations for satellite based bandwidth to go in. But we are seeing a lot of concentration on the coasts and in the more densely populated areas. So, do you have any idea as to why this kind of distribution is there, or is it some anomaly of the specific data set that was used to calculate these
Yeah.
points?
Yes. Thanks very much for your question. That's really depends on the data sets I'm using right there, because there are two data sets are actually dropped from two countries. So they have different magnitude basically and then scale. So in the US, I actually filtered out the some of the communities with the user less than 99 households. So that's why maybe you didn't see a lot of danced dots across the country because of that. Because in Canada, the data scale is different. They're not measured by the households, they're measured by the communities, the geographical sites. That's where, so that maybe the one of the dots represents hundreds of thousands of people over there.
Yeah, that's fine, Peng. My question is more on the lines of you'd expect that the east and west coast in the US, because of their population density, will have a much higher, distribution of terrestrial networks and fixed wireless networks available.
Mhm.
So you would expect there to be a corresponding decrease in the need for satellite connectivity, but that doesn't seem to be the case, right? The data is obviously showing something quite different. So I find that quite
Well,
surprising. I wanted your thoughts on that.
yes. So I would, this is based on the data itself. There's some specific descriptions you can check specifically from this paper of that mentions the data source. And also there are different rural areas as well. So not only the remote communities that are really dependent on that, and we should also realize there are some backbone connections like fiber optical connections are extending into different areas of the country. This is very true for the for Canada northern communities. They are all and some parts of the Alberta. They have some a lot of projects regarding the extension of the fiber optic connections. So some of the communities are actually merging into multiple connectivity options. So that's where really realistically making the SICN paradigm happen actually.
Okay.
Thank you, Peng. I think this is a great point that you're making, particularly with what we're seeing about the importance for redundancy and resiliency around the planet and having more than one network available. Rajiv, are you in the queue? Because, sorry, you're out of the queue now. Philip, are you in the queue to ask a question of Peng? We want to keep these pretty short so that he could answer a couple more. Great. Curtis, are you in the queue too? So you're up. And then John Clinton after Curtis.
So this was a great talk. Thank you so much, Peng. I'm going to email you out of band because I was literally in Ulukhaktuk, which is one of the dots on here, about 2 weeks ago installing a community network. And we're really like just trying to figure out when Starlink will get there and how important that'll be. I'm curious about a couple things. I think this map is interesting because ostensibly there's a community network in there. I can see the dot. But such a thing doesn't exactly exist. So I think we're using very different, or maybe different definitions of these things, because there's a Northwest-Tel satellite link in the village that gets used and everyone complains about. But the big question I have is about really the overall methodology. I mean, my experience in community networks has been that the failure modes are not things that require machine learning to figure out what happened. Unlike situations like Rogers and the other failures that are somewhat large and in the central core network, it's almost always just that the power has a problem. Or something like that. And so methodologically, what we do is, and we will be doing here soon, is going into the community and running some training courses and teaching people about the technology and teaching people about, hey, that blinky light's off, that means you should probably do something. How does that fit into you all's vision of creating resilient networks in these areas?
So yeah, that's a really good point. I noticed that some many community networks are currently set up in a very small scale, and they have their own different problems. Some are okay with just the traditional way of solving the issues or faults within the network. Some are really correlated to other areas or segments of the network, for example. But they do have common grounds. They do have common grounds in terms that machine learning can be used as a way to automate this process due to the lack of technical support, due to the lack of the expectation of responsive maintenance efforts to be done to give them really smooth and uninterrupted internet access experience. So what I imagine is that there will be some transformation due to the current satellite communications technologies. So, but maybe people can see that, okay, they have good connection to the Starlink, for example. I'm not promoting that service anyways, just example, to have good connection and a good cost-effective package. So in terms of that, the maintenance is still over there because there are going to be a lot of different stakeholders and operators into the service for providing internet connection to the community networks. And the training regarding the community network users will be to let them know the options and connectivity options. Maybe there's no one-size-fits-all right now, but for the broadband connectivity options, which is the major focus of my research in this here, that going to be, I think that will really need some technological advancements in there. Did I answer your questions or
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. We have about 3 to 4 more minutes for questions for Peng because we have some other great speakers in the queue. So John Clinton, I see you have a hand up and you've been patiently waiting. And Nabil Benamar, I think we're going to have to lock the queue after Nabil. So if we could do a quick round with Peng and Peng, if we could keep our answers a little short so that we can also, and let's make sure we have your email so that we can, if you don't mind putting it in the chat, so folks could contact you because this was a really great presentation. And Curtis, I want to put on the clipboard your point about the definition of CNs because that could be something we look at for the next meeting. So John Clinton, you're up. Question for Peng.
Are you concerned about the impact this work may have on the space junk, on encouraging more of these satellites, and consequently the space junk problem, or is that something you're just assuming somebody else is worried about?
Exactly, the space junk is one of the big concern. I'm doing the research actually on that area because that really the environmental space environmental issues is a big concern for humanity, and we have seen that though some activities have been done from European Space Agency and globally actually gradually, but we are glad to see that it's happening. But for sure, the space junk needs to be taken care at an early stage before it's getting worse.
Thank you, Peng. That's great. Nabil Benamar, a well-known colleague in the IETF. Nabil, over to you for a question for Peng.
Thank you, Jane. I'd like to ask you just a question about the simulation setup, maybe, because you have mentioned that you use the mininet with VMs, and I think that it can cause some issue when you want to scale to use a lot of nodes. So Mininet has a limit because of the RAM and all the stuff. So I'm asking about this and suggesting if you can, for further work, for future work, to use, for example, the Linux namespace. Linux namespace, you can go to thousands of nodes without any problem related to scale. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the comments. I do realize there is a limitation in terms of compute resources consumed by Mininet VMs, yes. And we really wanted to scale up. Maybe thanks for the suggestion.
Peng, this was a really great presentation. Thank you for such an interesting approach and all the great questions that everyone's been asking. And if you don't mind, I think everybody would love probably your contact information if you could pop it in the chat. We just want to make sure you're the person doing that rather than me or
yeah, sure.
From a privacy perspective. Cool. All right, Leandro, who do we have up next? Just checking the agenda. It looks like we have Philip Martinez, Resilient Education Information Infrastructure for the new normal. Philip, over to you.
Can you see my slides?
Not yet. It says it's being started.
Okay. Oops. I think you should see my screen right now. I cannot see the...
I still do not. Jane or Leandro, either of you?
Not yet. There's a bit of a delay.
Okay.
There is a message saying that a screen share is being started, but it hasn't yet appeared.
Okay. Let me just... I think this is a struggle for us. Oops. That one.
Yeah.
Yep, I see slides now.
Okay. I'll just enlarge this one. Good evening from the Philippines. Hi, everyone. It is great to present here at the... Well,
we lost slides.
Okay, sorry. Oopsie.
Back to being started. It was good there for a moment. There we go. It's back.
Okay, okay. So again, hi everyone. Pleased to meet you here, right, virtually. I'm Philip Martinez from the Philippines. I'm affiliated with the Department of Science and Technology, Advanced Science and Technology Institute, and I serve as the technical lead of this project, Resilient Education Information Infrastructure for New Normal. Okay. In this presentation, I will give you the overview of the project, its rationale, our technology demonstrators, the perceived social and economic impacts of this project, our pilot sites, and our current implementation challenges. So in the Philippines, on the onset of the pandemic, we have been forced to shift from traditional in-person classes to remote and online learning classes. This brought some serious problems because we still have this lack of quality, reliable, sustainable, and resilient ICT infrastructure. And this remains as a top challenge in the implementation of remote and hybrid learning in the Philippines. So the problem is that we had difficulties in educational content transmission in remote learning due to the unreliable internet connection in the Philippines. As you can see in the slide, those teachers are actually in their arms, in their cell phones, searching for a signal.
So the challenge that we are taking on at the OSTAST is to develop innovative solutions utilizing UHF TV channels to provide internet connectivity and to support remote education in the Philippines. So again, Project Rain, the focus of this project is to develop the solutions that uses UHF TV channels to support remote education and to provide internet connectivity, since face-to-face classes is still limited in the Philippines. We haven't opened our schools yet. So why UHF TV frequencies? The Philippines has yet to fully shift from analog TV to digital TV, and it's pegged at 2023. So there is an opportunity for us to champion for alternative use of to be vacated spectrum, specifically at 600 megahertz to 700 megahertz. For 600 megahertz, we are eyeing these frequencies for both LTE and new radio band 71, which could be used by alternative connectivity strategies such as community networks. And we could also use this for the ISDBT standard, which is the digital TV standard we adopted in the Philippines to implement datacasting test broadcasts. In our recent survey regarding the use of ICT devices in the Philippines last 2019, TV and smartphones are almost ubiquitous still in the Philippines, where 78.9% of Filipino households have working TV sets, and 40.9% of these households are within reach of digital TV signals, while 82.64% primarily access the internet here in the Philippines through our smartphones. So we have two technology demonstrators, that's what we call them for Project Rain, utilizing the 600 to 700 meg frequencies. The first is local LTE, or the local LTE, which is aims to develop a low-cost, small-scale LTE base station that aims to address the lack of internet access in remote and unserved areas in the country. This technology demonstrator builds upon the gains of an earlier project, the Village Base Station program, wherein we piloted community cellular networks offering 2G calls and texts. The second technology demonstrator is rural casting, wherein we utilize the data casting feature of the ISDBT standard to deliver educational digital content. Because right now, we only utilize the ISDBT to deliver broadcast content. And we see that we can use the ISDBT more and transmit more meaningful information. Again, let's focus on the first technology demonstrator first. So here is the system overview of local LTE. The radio access network and the core network is co-located at in one box. The user equipment, the subscriber needs to have a SIM card that is compatible with the network. And once you have the user equipment and the SIM card, and you are within the network coverage of the network, you can access the locally cached or locally stored educational materials, cache content, and local portals. For the radio access network and the core network, we host the LTE network monitoring control, subscriber management, and for this segment, we are using an SDR, and we are fitting a band 71 RF front end. And we connect this to the internet, which could be any technology, but for the areas that we are piloting it, we are using satellite backhaul. So once we connect it to the internet, the subscribers can access the internet. But without it, the subscribers can only access the locally cached content like videos and other educational materials. For rural casting, the goal is to utilize, again, data casting technology to supplement the educational experience of the students. You can see here in the slide the prototype of the rural casting receiver, wherein they are receiving the broadcast. At the same time, they at the background, the data casted file is being saved by the device. So again, the system overview is that We have a set-top box wherein it could be used as a standalone device, but it also is a Wi-Fi hotspot wherein other devices can connect to it. And the set-top box hosts an LMS like a Moodle, and it also hosts various apps from our partners, especially applications involving the teaching of mathematics, financial inclusion, and other specialized educational materials. Now, we envision that our teachers in the schools or in the rural areas can have their mini transmitters or mini TV transmitters so they can conduct remote classes in their schools wherein the transmitters are located, and the students that have their set-top boxes in their homes can continue learning at the comfort of their homes. So the teachers are pegged as content creators wherein they can upload modules, videos, and others, and they can use the mini SDR-based mini transmitters in their school to schedule content and to schedule the data or the other information that could be data casted during the broadcast. So we envision that these two technology demonstrators will have these four social impacts: better connectivity, access to information, health literacy. In the context of the pandemic, we need to provide verified health information to these areas. And number four, better learning experience. We also take note of the potential economic impacts of these technology demonstrators. Additional revenue for the community, eliminating some market barriers, maximizing market yields, attract investors. And number five is that we acknowledge that the problems in the community are unique to the community, and they could breed innovation with the tools that we have, and we could empower uh, the uh, the community members to solve their own problems and to breed innovation. And the sixth impact is the more educated workforce. So we will show you some of our pilot sites. We had a set criteria on how to select our pilot sites for this project. Number one is the absence of commercial mobile phone service, a school that is not more than 500 meters away from the community with at least 50 households. School officials and members of the community are willing to participate and cooperate in the project, and no ongoing armed conflict. Availability of passable roads, stable, reliable electric power from the local utility, and some open space to host our towers. So one of our pilot sites is San Andres, Tanay Rizal. It's a 2-hour ride from the capital Manila, but it has no cellular signal service because of geographical challenges. The other pilot is for one of our technology demonstrators, Royal Casting. It's a nearby town from San Andres. And the second pilot for our local LTE is in Zambales, wherein they also had difficulty in having cellular service. In fact, in that picture, that is the only spot in the community wherein they could receive SMS messages. So we are targeting 6 other pilot communities, and nomination of these communities is through data crowdsourcing, wherein we post a status on Facebook, and we would verify the information that was sent to us through various sources. So here are just some action pictures of the team performing spectrum measurements and verifications of site surveys, our preliminary testing of our technology demonstrators in one of the communities in Tanay Rizal. Here is technology demonstration for our teachers and our students using their smartphones. This is also a picture of technology demonstrator aimed at the community, not just the students, but the potential subscribers of the network. Here are some groundbreaking activity. Here in the Philippines, groundbreaking activities is a big thing because it signifies the start of a project and a start of something beneficial to the community. And here are some finished towers for San Andres and Zambales. One of the tower is hosted at top of the building of the school, while the other is on the ground. So currently, we are in talks with our regulator for limited permits in these select pilot areas. And we are hoping for policy changes or recommendations for government entities such as UST performing quasi-telco functions, because right now, importation of telco equipment, using of frequencies, that functions are exclusive for our telco companies. And with that, we had a restricted ability to import LTE Band 71 commercial off-the-shelf radios and end-user devices. So we had to resort to building our own RF front end using software-defined radios. And we also have an apparent redundancy with the free Wi-Fi program for all of the Philippines, wherein um, another department is installing free Wi-Fi hotspots. But we believe that sustainable operational model for community buy-in or participative networks is a more suitable option rather than this free Wi-Fi uh, that is dependent on subsidies all around. So we want to establish LTE networks wherein the community can buy in and participate and operate. And here's pictures of our team. And with that, I end my presentation. And thank you. Our email is at projectrain@asti.usd.gov.ph. And you can follow our updates in Facebook at facebook.com/projectrain. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. So we can move to the questions.
I guess I'm first in the queue again. Hi, Philip. That's an amazing presentation you just gave. You guys seem to be doing some great work, in the community. And I just wanted to find out if you guys are open to more collaborations, because we are doing some very similar stuff. You will see that when we present, and we'd love to, just kind of touch base with you and compare notes, because um, I'm sure each of us will have a lot of learnings from our respective activities in rural communities that can become a part of the knowledge base as we build towards serving more and more communities worldwide.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you could leave the email for this so that
I will
we could
definitely.
start our communication. Basically, this is an opportunity for us to compare notes actually, because while the core technology is the same, we have different contexts in our deployments. So our problems might be similar, our problems might not that similar, but at least we can compare notes. What are the
No,
best
I'm pretty
practices
sure
for
that the
community network?
approaches we are taking are going to be significantly different, because we are approaching this from a entirely non-governmental,
Mm.
angle, where we don't really. We're basically looking at working through an existing telco and stuff like that, whereas you're doing a lot through, government programs and the ability, like you said, of your organization to become like a quasi telco, on the back of policy, intervention from the government to allow you to do things quite differently from what we are doing. So, like I said, a lot of opportunity to compare notes.
Yes, definitely.
All right, I'll jump in. I think I'm the next in the queue. Thanks, Flip. Thanks for jumping in here and being helpful. Just for everyone in the room, worked with Flip for a while. He's one of the best. And I wanted to ask, you're going to hear me beating the same drum for everyone who will be keep coming to Gaia of technical training. using platforms like this. I know that your mandate is kind of education in school and early childhood, not really that early childhood sense, but like, have there been discussions about learning about how the internet works through installations like this, and how in order to help sort of build capacity?
We have been in talks with other groups in the Philippines, wherein we really need to have an information drive or some materials wherein how to access the internet, or how to use the internet for the first time, or how to filter the news that you receive in Facebook or fake news, especially here in the Philippines. Other groups have signified interest to learn to collaborate with us on that aspect.
Cool, awesome, thank you.
I see still Rajiv in the queue. I don't know if you want to.
No,
another question?
I'm just joining the queue since I believe we are next in line to present.
Okay. Then, is there any other question in the room or remotely? Any comment? Well, if not, I would say that I was impressed by how you managed to combine technology to serve the schools. It's amazing, and I'm looking forward to any data about experiences, because I think it's going to be very useful in many other occasions. So, and a great solution in the context of Gaia. Keep on doing this because it's really amazing.
Thank you, Leandro.
Okay, so then thank you so much, and then we can move to the next presentation, which is N50, Digital Inclusion Pilot at Lumbo, Zambia, by Rajiv and Kevin.
Hi, Leandro, if you could authorize my ability to screen share, I will
Sure.
go ahead and, yes, perfect. I've started it at my end. I hope it's visible to everyone.
Yes, it is. It worked.
Great, perfect. So let me hand over to Kevin, who will get us started, and I'll come in on the tech side of stuff.
Excellent. Thank you, Rajiv. And thank you all for having us. I'm Kevin Schwartz of Geeks Without Frontiers, and I help lead the N50 project. And as mentioned, I'm here with Rajiv from PicoNets. We'd like to share with you both the N50 project and the learnings from a specific project in Zambia. Rajiv, could you move us to the next slide? So it's important to know about N50 project in order to understand the work that we're going to talk about in Zambia. N50 project is a consortium of more than 80 organizations. They're commercial, NGO, academic, and more. This group includes really large international companies such as Intel, Dell, and Philips. It also includes important partners such as PicoNets, telehealth providers, education specialists, and even some specific niche providers of specific technologies and services. We believe in a few things. Half the world's population is not currently using the internet, and that access is only part of the problem. It could be that it's relatively expensive. It could be poor internet quality. It could be a language barrier. It could be a lack of digital literacy, or it could be a lack of relevant applications. And we actually think that last one is one of the most important ones that we try to focus on. So in the next slide, we sort of spell out a little bit of our values and our mission in this, beginning with communities are the source of values and are included from the outset. And while many organizations are motivated by goals to help marginalized communities, no one organization can tackle the challenge alone. Even some of these giant organizations that I mentioned earlier have all said, we're better together. And we believe that if we can demonstrate novel, replicable solutions using a technology that's available today at the edge, and that these include services that support the adoption of broadband, we can create recipes that other communities can readily utilize. We're not going to be able to solve the challenge alone of 3.9 billion people not currently using the internet, but if we can create these models that communities can select and replicate with willing partners, then we can get there together. Rajiv, on our next slide, you can see that this is the process that we undertake: careful curation of projects that are focused on a sustainable outcome, blueprints for communities, and then matching partners with specific capabilities to the community's needs. Overall, we always invite everyone to join in50. It's an open collaboration without fees or dues or things like that. It's just simply a coalition of the willing, dedicated to this work. And we may have 80 partners, but maybe 6 work on one project and 7 on another and 2 on another. It just depends on what the community challenges that we're trying to solve. On the next slide, we can show you a list right now, as of at least yesterday, a list of our partners that we have in our consortium. This list is growing at a rate of about 2 or 3 per week as we are engaging with partners to join. So we have many projects that are underway or emerging around the globe. Our highest profile projects right now include support for Ukrainian refugees and displaced persons, and also our pilot project in Luambo, Zambia. And that's the focus of our presentation today, where Rajiv will take us shortly to talk about how we work to solve the challenge in that community. Luambo is a perfect example of what we call the edge. The location was selected as a way to prove out multiple concepts, knowing that if we were successful in Luambo, the likelihood of success in other communities was actually very high. Rajiv and PicoNets were heavily involved in this project from the outset. Rajiv, can you share with us what you found in Luambo when you arrived, and how did the project proceed?
Yes. So one of the biggest challenges that Kevin already mentioned earlier is that there are a number of factors which may be having an involvement in saying that there's a community that isn't participating in the internet. We talked about cost, we talked about access to devices, we talked about digital literacy, and all of these factors, have some part to play in the challenge being solved. So one of the things that we really wanted to do is pick a community where it's reasonably small, reasonably tight knit, which means we can very effectively measure and establish a baseline, so that when we start doing different things, different interventions, we can see what kind of impact they're having. So the first stage was obviously working with a telco who is covering that area. Up until just January of this year, all these people had was 2G and very spotty 3G connectivity. Okay, nothing beyond that. So the first intervention was actually looking at how the community utilization of internet and services transitions as 4G started moving into the community. Then, we collected some of that data, put that together, and then we started taking the next step, where we started seeding the community with more devices, especially 4G capable devices, both in terms of bringing in devices for targeted communities like the school teachers, okay, or the healthcare workers, and also to bring devices into the general community. Bring in specialized tablets and computers into the schools, both the primary as well as the secondary schools in the community. And all of these are things that we are looking at. With every intervention, we are collecting a lot of data, we're collecting usage trends, because all of this is eventually going to go into our report that will help, like Kevin said, build a template that can be reused by other communities as they look to improve their own connectivity and digital literacy. Um, the next step for us is to actually go and address the content side of the equation, okay, which is, hey, uh, you now have access, you now have devices, but what are you going to consume with that access and those devices that you have, right? So that is where we really wanted to drive specific and very relevant content, and allow the community to start consuming that, uh, and also specifically putting it at a point where it comes in at a reasonable enough cost so that the community can really consume without having to literally break the bank like they used to have earlier. So uh, Luambo actually, like I said, already now has a 4G tower run by AMN. It's Africa Mobile Network. They're a specialist tower company that does a lot of rural, tower sites, specifically tied up with larger telcos, so that the locations that the telcos themselves don't necessarily want to go and put in their own infrastructure. AMN does that, and they work with the telcos. Um, Luambo itself does not have a solid terrestrial bandwidth link, so the remote site over there is working off a satellite backhaul, which is by its very nature a constrained network. So what we've done is we've really started putting together, in parallel with all of these other activities, a highly replicable stack of everything needed in order to be able to run a local tower like this, starting all the way from the Node B, the EPC, the radios. Then we also bring in the ability to have a CDN and caching component in that infrastructure. And in all of this, we then enable various content partners to come in. Like we have someone like Babu, who is education content provider, who builds content for the Zambian curriculum. Uh, we also don't want to only keep this as a very education focused initiative, though education is a very large part of it. We also wanted to be able to touch other parts and other members of the community. So we have a commercial FM station uh, coming in as one of our content partners, and we're enabling them so that Money FM, which also carries a lot of financial education and financial empowerment content, agricultural content, uh, that is something that we want the community to have the ability to consume. We've also gone down the road of some religious content because Faith Life is one of the partners there. They're basically providing us access to a Tonga version of the Bible, okay, which is something which is again not very easy to access in that community. We're also working with virtual doctors, so there's a health component of this, and all of this is being basically brought together inside as compact a technical footprint as possible to keep the costs low, and allow it to work even in a small community that doesn't necessarily have a large number of subscribers. So when you can keep those costs low, keep the technology simple enough so that a telco does not have to worry too much about saying, hey, uh, am I biting off more than I can chew by enabling such small uh, remote sites that I, as a telco, am not normally geared up to be able to support and manage, which is why we have not gone into that before. By putting this in front of them, we answer that question and say, hey, here's a tried and proven stack that's completely open, that's available to you, that allows you to continue to operate and serve these communities at a much higher level without necessarily having to do a lot of changes in your network architecture and all of that. So, like I said, Luambo is pretty small, less than 4,000 residents in all. So, we have been very selective in terms of selecting our first set of partners because we want this to be our template and a big deliverable of this pilot project. One obviously is the report that shows how digital utilization of resources grows and how much of an impact each of these various interventions that we have done in that community results in a bump in the usage. And this is something that we intend to run over a reasonably long period of time. We have like almost a 2 year, 2+ year project horizon for collecting data and making sure that it's not just a short-term bump that we see because of it's just something novel and new that the community sees. We want We want there to be a sustained improvement in digital literacy and digital engagement in that community. Um, in addition to what we are doing with the community themselves, we have also, like I said, been working on the back end to make this entire tech stack highly replicable. So once we have this report and we have this uh, example tech stack ready, we can then literally go anywhere in the world, any telco, okay, and say, hey, guys, let's start using this template to start going into communities that you have been hesitant to start serving up until now. So back to Kevin, I think you can take us through some more of the fine-grained details of exactly what we are doing in, the schools in Luombo.
Sure, and I'd just like to add some information that wasn't available at the time that we submitted our presentation. We're actually starting to see some analytics come in, even though this is early in implementation. It's not even fully implemented yet. There's certainly years worth of adoption work to be done, but we've seen already a 25% increase in usage in the community, and almost all that's coming in that 4G space, which was almost non-existent, and this wouldn't have been possible without the N50 stack in place here. And so where we're seeing this happen is because the applications are relevant to the community also, not just as the service there, but it's relevant in the schools, and they have now access to content and materials and online lessons and videos that they didn't have access to before. The same thing is true on the healthcare side, where, and this is especially true in a pandemic, where access was very distant, not timely, and not necessarily the right specialty or the right quality. Virtual Doctors, another N50 partner, has been working here to help provide healthcare services remotely, and that's made it much easier and much more timely for them to get services. This is something we expect to see increasing as well as the adoption proceeds. And then on the next slide, Rajiv, I want to talk for a moment about how important it is to, from the start, have sustainability plans in place. It doesn't work if we just simply, through philanthropy or even through a good model, drop in equipment, if it isn't something that can be sustained by the community. We believe fully that when it's relevant and the adoption measures are in place, that itself helps to drive sustainability. But the business models have to be there. It has to be worthwhile for businesses to continue to invest in communities, so that the market opens up, and that healthy market is a great sign of sustainability. So we set out specific measurement indicators to let us know how we're doing in our work and how we're doing in sustainability. Like I said, these early analytics coming in from Luombo are very encouraging, but it's not the goal, right? The goal is much higher than just these initial marks. So another hallmark of the N50 project is, while we're committed to communities, we're also committed to exit strategies, right? We don't have an interest in N50 in being the provider for a long term. We want to turn this over to the market, and so we're looking for our way out before we ever get in, so that this is not a dependency situation at all. Truly, the market develops and sustainability persists. And the persistence is towards the community defined goals, what they've said is important to them. We don't come into it with any preconceived notions about what a community wants, but we do find similar things coming up over and over again, and they do center around education, healthcare, agriculture, financial literacy, and sometimes it's cultural priorities. Even in the U.S., we find this with tribal nations. Their sovereignty, their government services are hugely important. So common themes, but unique to each community. And then next slide. So we have released a white paper on this, and I know that this presentation is not something you can click on, so I'll pop it in the chat, where you can see this white paper. We're already seeing the learning from this spread to other projects in Africa and other places around the world, where other organizations are saying, hey, what you did there will work here. Let's try it in a context of agriculture. Let's try it in a context in Ghana, or let's look at what's happening in Zimbabwe and see how this might extend. So we encourage you to take a look at this and get more details than what we had just the time to cover today. And next slide, Rajiv. And I'll give you just a quick glimpse of where the N50 project is going. these are some dots of active and emerging projects. We're beginning to have presence all around the globe. N50 Project is relatively new. It formally launched in February, so this is a 6-month-old organization, even though some of this pilot work we're talking about in Luambo started almost a year before that. The ecosystem of partners is still kind of in full launch. So you'll see more projects in these areas, and then hopefully more recipes being adopted from these projects into other communities. Next slide, Rajiv. If you'd like to learn more, this is how. N50project.org is our website. N50project.org/join is how you sign up. And again, I mentioned there's no membership fees or annual dues, and that's not necessarily a sales pitch because there's nothing to sell, but it is an indication of how we work. It's a coalition of the willing, and we ask partners to bring a project or support a project that works in the ways that we've said are important to communities. And I think hopefully now we have time for questions.
Yes, so looking forward to your questions, everyone.
For your questions, do we have any takers? You've done such a wonderful job with the presentation. I don't see any. Oh, wait, we have one for Leandro. Leandro, you're up with a question.
Hi, yeah, I'm impressed by the how much you achieved in so short time in the N50 project. Yeah, you already mentioned some benefits, some impact, but given that you are intending to replicate the model, you know, ICT technologies bring a lot of benefits, obviously, but there are also some risks and some imbalances in the communities. Typically, I mean, technology, it's like something magic for all of us, and even more for the communities that are not used to technology. And I was wondering about your experience about how this introduction, I mean, affects each community. It affects, for instance, the structure of power. It somehow helps to create new jobs, maybe in creating local content or in repairing, maintaining the infrastructure, in bringing some new opportunities. Like, for instance, electricity brings light, and then there are some side effects, as you mentioned, also in health and everything. Have you thought about doing some kind of formal, let's say, independent analysis of the impact to make sure that the model is it's as positive as possible, or and as polished as possible while you replicate the model?
That is such an insightful question. Thank you for that. I come to this work, Leandro, from 25 years working in K-12 education in the U.S. So from before the internet to times when now every student has access to a device and a computer. And we've seen the good, the bad, the better, the ugly, all of it. It sort of begins with an understanding, though, that by not having access, while the world continues apace with access, these communities continue to be marginalized even more so. So the reality is that technologies are already impacting them in a negative way, and the only thing that can help to improve that is the technology. So applied in the correct way. So that's why we start with the community's goals and aspirations first, so that ends up being the focus of the outcomes for the communities. But yes, there are things to mitigate, things to understand from the start, to make it the best of what it can be and the least of the bad that it can be. Because technology in general will accelerate what you're already doing unless you purposefully make a shift in how it's applied. This is something we've learned over and over. So where some projects in the past may have stopped at the delivery of the service or the delivery of the device per se, without follow-on for digital literacy, which includes digital citizenship, it almost always ends poorly and worse for the community than if nothing were done at all. So that's why the heavy focus for our side on the adoption side of this, on applications that are relevant to the community, so that it begins with the good for them. I don't know. I like the question. I'm not trying to dodge the question about the analysis. I'm not sure how actually to approach that analysis, except by looking at everything that we're doing and publishing all of the results that we find. And sometimes we have to learn as we're going what is and isn't working there. But I think the best we can do at the moment is focusing on the positive outcomes that we can get, and knowing that unmitigated it goes poorly.
And Leandro, if I'd like to kind of chip in, one of the very important decisions that we made, like I said, very early on in the project, was to get our community liaison, our community manager in place, and talking to the community long before we had even started any of the technical work or the measurement work, because we know that unless the community feels involved and a part of the process, and not just a part of the execution, but a part of the planning end of the process, there's never really going to be as much of a buy-in into the potential of what the project can deliver. Then if someone literally kind of helicopters in, drops a bunch of devices and some tech in there, and then just expects the community to figure stuff out on their own. Right. So it was very important for us, which is why long before we got the first device or the first piece of tech in there, we had a community manager. We had multiple meetings with the community, understanding what they wanted, understanding how to do something safely. Because it may be as simple as deciding, okay, you're not going to carpet bomb the entire community with 4,000 devices. We don't have the resources to do that. You're going to send a few hundred devices into that community. How do you send them in safely so that you don't have to worry about negative effects in that community? It may be something as simple as saying, hey, my neighbor received a phone for free and I didn't. I'm jealous, and that leads to a social angle of all of this. So we had to do a lot of this planning, and like, for example, one of the interesting things that we are doing in this community is, when we're sending devices out into the community, they go with a agreement that someone who's receiving the device agrees to do certain things, to start learning certain skills, okay, using those devices as an enabler. So people don't feel that, hey, he's just getting something for free. He's committing to participate in the project, and that participation is what we really want to highlight as a part of our analysis and our report. And hopefully that uh, we hope that the results that come out of this entire exercise will really encourage others to follow this similar kind of highly participative model when they're trying to do for future projects.
Yes, thank you. Very good answer. Well, I mean, in the research community, there are conferences and groups that work on ICT for development. They have experience in evaluating projects, and what you mentioned is really important. I fully agree. And I can see one comment from Alian Farrell that in the chat. Maybe you can read it and
I
answer
am
it.
going through that at the moment.
Yeah, I had a chance to look at that while you were responding, Leandro.
Mhm.
Rajiv, let's tag team this a little bit. I would start with the point that's made in it that we may have come across as providing this only to leaders, technical teachers, and clinicians, and so forth. And I would just say the opposite's true, Adrian. I hope that this is something you can catch on the audio later. It's very much about getting to the individuals, and sometimes we have to actually sort of work with communities through that, because sometimes their go-to is to give it to the leaders, and we generally insist more on making sure that it gets to the students, to the families, to the mothers, to the children in the communities.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've seen in previous projects or research publications that they talk about the sense of ownership or the appropriation that and the difficulty to talk to everyone in the community without amplifying the imbalances that are already there. Like, for instance, talking to the leaders means talking to people, to men, not to women, or talking to someone. You are giving them some power, and sharing this power between you and the community is tricky, especially because you might be there for a very long time, but they are going to be there forever. And then as long as they see that as a critical resource that they manage and they decide or co-decide, then this is going to last more or less, or help the community, everyone in the community, or not some of them. But yeah, I mean, this is intrinsically difficult challenge, and I was really happy to hear your approach. I don't know if there are other comments in the room. I see Jane. Go ahead.
Sorry, it takes a bit of time with the audio. Thank you for the presentation, and I would just like to add a voice to your and support to the community-based approach. Those that know me know that's something I believe in very strongly. I've been doing some work, not internationally, which was something I've been doing for 25 years, but doing some more domestic work in the United States recently. And when I think you go into a community, people often, as you say, can parachute in, right? And I've seen that when I worked in other communities overseas. And the parachute in approach just doesn't work. It doesn't bring that sustainability around. I really liked your point about working with the community, across the community. I work for a different organization now, but we're finding that I used to work at the Internet Society, but we're finding that when you're looking at doing planning grants for getting money to build out for community networks or small networks, that bringing in a variety of different actors across that community is critical from the very beginning. You don't want a single point of failure in your network. You don't want single points of failure in your community approach either. And so I just wanted to thank you for the presentation, and very interesting. And as Adrian said, I too am going to take a stronger look at what you've been doing, because I think there's a great approach here that can be integrated. We're looking at doing some community readiness approaches, and I just wondered, have you found a good way to do a quick assessment of where communities might be with respect to the different learning tracks that you want to bring in? Because we're finding that we need to come in at a parallel approach now versus just a single tracked approach with sort of a linear value chain of effort. We're thinking that we need to come in with various different tracks of learning almost simultaneously. But I would love to hear your thoughts on sort of a readiness approach.
Jane, I thank you for your comments and your questions for multiple reasons. So thinking about, how some organizations intentionally or unintentionally parachute in and parachute out of communities and how that doesn't work. We've specifically taken the opposite approach, as I think you've noticed. I think this is most apparent when we were working with tribal communities in the United States, where simply gaining access to the communities a challenge, right? It's very insular and proudly sovereign. And one of the first looks you get is, who are you and how long will you be here? And very little happens until you prove that you will stay and be committed. And so, having been now involved over years with the same communities, helping them to identify grant opportunities, build business strategies, do implementation, do adoption, do sustainability, has been a trust building operation that allows us to then bring like-minded organizations to them to help further. And then in terms of project curation, I think I would love to come back and do a whole other session on project curation, because we have some wonderful materials we've developed in partnership with our team to do that curation of community readiness, partner readiness, impact measurement, and so forth. There's actually a starter kit on our website that's available to anybody if there's interest in that. But we could do another session and talk about how we bring projects into the fold.
Thank you. That would be very, we could definitely consider that. I should stop talking and see if there's anyone else that has a question or an observation. I think just want to validate Leandro and Curtis. I don't think we have the other presentations from the perspective folks that were going to also speak. So we may have more time to just have a Q&A with all of the participants who are here. Am I right about that, Leandro?
Yes, we haven't got slides or the login, so we cannot expect more presentations today. But yeah, as you said, I think there's a nice opportunity to talk about how the three presentations we had, how they could combine with each other. Maybe we can ask the other presenters to reflect on what they saw here today, and then how their approach could combine or is different, similar from the others, and start a discussion about the whole the three ways of addressing a common problem.
Leandro, I'd like to also bring up one point, that I thought would be interesting for us to also explore. That is the possibility of, identifying now, entirely aside from the project and, the community and everything, purely on the technical side. Okay, some of the challenges that we're overcoming in these environments, at a technical level, both in terms of integration with telco networks as well as deep edge caching for content to make it more readily available to communities in such challenging environments. Some of those technical solutions that come out of our project and all of the other projects that we've been looking at during this meeting might also be a good foundation to think of in terms of some technical standards, or at least technical best practices guidelines work that can eventually turn into an RFC at the IETF. So basically become a good template that can help people really put together community networks. And if you could help connect us with wherever in the IETF work is happening around defining those community networking RFCs, we'd really love to see what we can do there in terms of contribution.
Mm-hmm. Good point. So let's see. I mean, what the others say about these two ideas, and how we can elaborate on the collective effort on a collective set of presentations today. For instance, you mentioned in the first presentation there was mention of satellite-based community networks. I don't know, for instance, your own experience about that, or the case of Philippines. Also, there was some part in satellite. As you said, Rajiv, there are many technical solutions out there, and well, I have to say that RFCs are not the best marketing tool, but
yeah. So I'm basically thinking of them beyond a marketing tool, but like we said, at the N50, we're very focused on building recipes that are reusable. We want to build solutions both in terms of process as well as in terms of technology that basically make projects like this a much lower risk and much faster implementation to the community over time, because that's, I believe, the only way we'll make a dent on the problem, the scale of the problem as we see it.
Yeah, I mentioned the term marketing, but not in the terms of selling products, but about selling ideas. Is that usually RFCs work across the technical community, but they are not really designed to be, let's say, read or understood by people outside our technical community. But yeah, it's an instrument. Several years ago in Gaia, we developed one RFC reporting about the technological options at that time. and discussing about it. And I think it was helpful to realize, well, the differences and the commonalities. But at the same time, when you think about community networks, it's difficult to come up with a specific challenging problems that the technical community can solve globally. But there are solutions, and the solutions are more or less adapted to community networking environments. You can see in the IETF some work about like low rate connections or routing or energy related. So yeah, I mean, collecting this information, as you said, would reduce the risk in and would facilitate new initiatives to at least be aware of the experiences and learn from mistakes, learn from the successes. And yeah, it would be nice to somehow be able to summarize the technical lessons, but also the other lessons, governance lessons and economic lessons from other initiatives in a compact manner, so it would be reusable and as an organizational memory for other initiatives. Any other comments about this, around this?
My only comment, Leandro, would be to reinforce the collaborative nature of the N50 project. We believe better together, and we don't see anything but compatibility with everything else we saw today. Different communities need different technical solutions. They need different adoption solutions, and the more we have at the ready, the better we can serve our communities.
Yeah. And by the way, just taking a couple of minutes for you to know, the IETF has too many parallel meetings and working meetings. Just from my agenda tomorrow, at the same time as today, there is another research group. It's called ICN, Information-Centric Networking. That is a technical group that focuses on information-centric networks oriented to content. Also at in my 7:30, so in 2 hours from now, tomorrow, or 1.5 hours from now, is the HRPC, the Human Rights in Protocols working group, and also later on is the Decentralized Internet Research Group that also touches topics which are connected to this. I don't know if anyone in the audience wants to comment about any of these upcoming meetings tomorrow.
Kevin, it might make sense if you want to talk a little bit about some of what the N50 is doing in Ukraine right now, because that is probably also tying into some of these topics that Leandro just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And the work we're doing in and around Ukraine is sort of the other end of the spectrum, if you will, to have a pun on that, where it's a completely different solution that we're working there. So folks who are displaced or are leaving Ukraine are in the millions, and they're highly mobile, but they are also edge and marginalized people. So we set out at the start of the conflict to deploy what we call PCCs, which is portable connectivity centers, and these are shipping containers that are purpose built to have network gear included in them. You can put them anywhere. They have solar panels and diesel generators. You can connect them to anything from satellite to a local MNO, to Ethernet, to fiber, and they can be moved and reconnected as the situation changes on the ground. So knowing that these were coming into that type of a context, knowing that we were still in a pandemic, these are essentially not internal shelters, they're external radiation areas where the service is provided around the containers and the equipment is kept inside. We have multiple partners participating in this. Almost none of them put their logos on it. It's strictly a philanthropic effort, though substantial resources were committed to it, to provide computers, to provide the network connectivity as we go around, to provide the on-site staffing. We're working with World Vision to deploy 10 of these containers right now, some 4 weeks after the first ideation occurred, we had the first container in placed in Bucharest, Romania to support refugees. Now what we're finding is that the demand is increasing for these containers pretty substantially, where we can provide government services, where we can provide healthcare, where continuing education can occur, where wayfinding services can occur. Just where am I and how do I get to the next place on my journey? And so we're working with various ministries in Ukraine and around Ukraine to make these a semi-sustainable solution until more permanent resolution occurs to the conflict there. So that's the other type of thing that we do. I could go through 10 other type of projects and tell you how they're all different, but you start to see how the weight of these different organizations can be brought to bear on almost any challenge, and rather quickly when they work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, what you mentioned, for instance, is connected to this computer aid project on solar learning labs, and
Yes, sir. Yes.
that we're in touch since several years ago. We have some students now in South Africa these days preparing for one solar learning lab in a place in the community there. And I also share the link of this community network exchange that is happening these days in India as well. So it's really comforting to see so many activities around. So I think we are getting close to the end of the session. I wonder if Curtis or Jane want to comment anything else and close the session.
Sure. First, thanking all the presenters. These were fantastic, good discussions, and so much synergy between them. Hopefully, you all can chat with each other. And I'll be sending some reach out emails for our own work, which I think similarly dovetails well. I want to also call out the note takers. I think of particular value was Nick, who seems to have done a bunch of writing. So thank you so much for that. But of course, there were other folks as well. So anyone who jumped in and provided a little bit more context for the folks who aren't going to be or who couldn't be here live in this hybrid world we live in, great thanks for that. And lastly, is probably just a call out for any other talks people want to give. I think this is a great venue for people to share their work and to get more feedback from outside of whatever bubble we all individually live in. It was great to see some of the different ecosystems that play here and different countries and different perspectives on connectivity. So Jane, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Seeing Jane pop up and not hearing anything. Showing no kilobits a second, which might be a problem. I'll assume Jane doesn't have much to add.
Okay, now it's coming through. It's funny. It took a good 30 seconds, but no, just to thank everybody, to echo what Curtis and Leandro have both said, and to thank everyone for their presentations, and to just echo Curtis's invitation for more data presentations, collaboration, and we'll be back at you on the Gaia list. So join the Gaia list if you haven't. And we welcome lots of dialogue on that list. It's been a little quiet over the last couple of months, but we'll reinvigorate that. And just to sort of put something on the clipboard that came up during the conversation is this discussion about what community networks are. And I think Peng had a good point about satellite-related integration of networks with, terrestrial-based other. And I think it would be great for us to explore what the RFC that we've already got in place, but to maybe elaborate on that or hack a new one together. So otherwise, thanks everybody for your time and for hanging in there with us throughout the almost 2 hours. And it was a great opportunity to hear more from others around the planet. So thanks so much. And we'll call it a day for now, or an evening for some of you.
Next Gaia.
See you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye and take care.
Bye-bye.